What would you do if your neighbor started stealing your packages under the guise of HOA rules? Karen Shelton, the manipulative head of the HOA, used her position to intimidate and exploit the community for her own gain. But Eleanor Hayes refused to back down, armed with courage, evidence, and an unshakable sense of justice. You won't believe the shocking twist that exposed Karen's schemes and proved that truth always prevails. Eleanor Hayes stood in her cozy kitchen, the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air as the morning sunlight streamed through the windows. Her life had finally started to settle after years of upheaval. The quiet Florida suburb was everything she had hoped for, a safe, friendly community where she could raise her 10-year-old son, Max, and build a peaceful life. That morning, Eleanor was excited. She had ordered several special packages for Max's upcoming birthday, a set of limited edition action figures, his favorite comic books, and a hand-painted sign with his name for his bedroom door. When her phone pinged with the delivery notification, her heart leapt with anticipation. But as she stepped onto the porch, her excitement turned to confusion. It was empty. For a moment, Eleanor thought she might have made a mistake. She double-checked her emails, scrolling through the confirmation messages. They all said the same thing: delivered. Her heart sank. Where could the packages be? She looked around the neatly trimmed bushes and even checked by the driveway, hoping the delivery person had left them somewhere out of sight. But there was nothing. Just as she was about to contact customer support, there was a knock at the door. Eleanor opened it to find Karen Shelton, her impeccably dressed neighbor and head of the local HOA, standing with a package in hand. Karen's smile was tight, the kind that didn't reach her eyes, and Eleanor immediately felt a pang of unease. "Good morning, Eleanor," Karen said, holding up the box like a trophy. "I noticed this on your porch and wanted to make sure it didn't stay out too long." Eleanor blinked, her confusion deepening. "I was just looking for that. Thank you, but why did you take it?" Karen's expression hardened, her tone dripping with authority. "The HOA has recently implemented new rules regarding unsecured deliveries. Packages left out for over an hour are considered abandoned and must be reclaimed for safekeeping." Eleanor stared at her neighbor, struggling to process what she'd just heard. "Abandoned? That's absurd. I just got the delivery notification." Karen shrugged, her posture stiff. "Rules are rules, Eleanor. I'm only enforcing them for the good of the community." She held the package just out of Eleanor's reach for a moment before handing it over. "Next time, make sure you're more prompt. We can't have clutter ruining the aesthetic." Eleanor felt her face flush with anger as Karen turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement. Clutching the package, Eleanor closed the door, her heart racing. Something about Karen's explanation felt off. No, wrong. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't about rules or aesthetics. It was about control. Sitting at the kitchen table, Eleanor stared at the package, her mind racing. Who gave Karen the right to decide what was abandoned or not? And what other rules had the HOA supposedly implemented without her knowledge? As she sipped her now lukewarm coffee, one thought solidified in her mind. This wasn't over. On a crisp Saturday morning, Eleanor took a walk through the neighborhood, the cool breeze carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and the occasional rustle of falling leaves. The idyllic setting couldn't distract her from the nagging sense of injustice. She couldn't shake Karen's smug expression or her audacious claim about the so-called rules. Something wasn't right, and Eleanor was determined to uncover the truth. She began her quest by talking to her neighbors. Most were polite but dismissive, offering vague comments or awkward shrugs. "Karen's been in charge for years," one man muttered, glancing nervously at his window. "It's easier not to make waves." But some were willing to talk. Mrs. Powell, an elderly widow with a warm smile, invited Eleanor in for tea. As they sat in the cozy living room, Mrs. Powell lowered her voice, her hands trembling slightly around her mug. "Karen's been overstepping her boundaries for a long time," she confided. "She fines people for things that aren't in the bylaws, blocks renovations she doesn't like, and even demanded keys to my backyard for inspection." Eleanor was stunned. "Why hasn't anyone confronted her? This is wrong," Mrs. Powell sighed. She's intimidating, and without proof, what can we do? Those words lit a spark in Eleanor. Proof. That was the key. That evening, Eleanor installed a discreet security camera on her porch. The next few days passed uneventfully, but she remained vigilant, reviewing the footage every night. Then, on the fourth day, she found what she was looking for. The video showed Karen strolling up her driveway, climbing the steps, and casually taking a package left by the courier. Her movements were confident, almost rehearsed, as though she felt untouchable. Eleanor's heart raced as she watched the footage. This wasn't enforcement. This was theft. Armed with the video, Eleanor decided to confront Karen at the next HOA meeting. The room was filled with neighbors, their murmurs echoing off the walls as Karen stood at the front, addressing them with her usual air of authority. When Eleanor's turn came, she played the footage for all to see. The room fell silent. The unmistakable image of Karen taking Eleanor's package played on the screen, followed by audible gasps from the audience. Karen's face flushed, but her composure didn't waver. "This proves nothing," she said, her voice sharp. "As HOA president, I have the authority to act in the best interest of the community. The bylaws support my actions." Eleanor's frustration grew as the board, composed mostly of Karen's allies, dismissed the evidence. They claimed the video didn't show the full context and reiterated Karen's authority to enforce the rules. It was a crushing blow. But as Eleanor left the meeting, feeling cornered but not defeated, a voice called out to her. It was Mr. Olson, a retired lawyer known for his sharp wit and unwavering integrity. "Don't give up," he said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Karen's been getting away with this for too long. I'll help you bring the truth to light." That night, Eleanor and Mr. Olson gathered with a small group of neighbors who had their own grievances against Karen. Around her kitchen table, they shared stories, pored over HOA documents, and began to connect the dots. Together, they were building a case, a united front against injustice. For the first time in weeks, Eleanor felt hope. This wasn't just her fight anymore. Eleanor's dining room had transformed into a makeshift war room. Stacks of papers lined the table, illuminated by the warm glow of a desk lamp. The air was thick with determination as Eleanor pored over documents late into the night. With the help of Mr. Olson and her small group of allies, the pieces of Karen's manipulation began to fall into place. What they uncovered was shocking. The so-called HOA rules Karen often referenced didn't actually exist. Instead, Karen had been cherry-picking vague clauses from outdated documents and presenting them as enforceable policies. Worse yet, the group discovered evidence that Karen had been funneling HOA funds into her personal accounts under the guise of neighborhood improvement projects. These projects, as it turned out, included remodeling her backyard, installing a new patio, and even upgrading her home security system. Eleanor felt a surge of anger and resolve. This wasn't just about packages anymore. It was about exposing Karen's abuse of power. She compiled everything they had, video footage, testimonies from neighbors, and copies of HOA financial records obtained through a legal request. Each piece of evidence painted a damning picture of Karen's misconduct, but Karen wasn't going down without a fight. As whispers of Eleanor's investigation spread through the neighborhood, Karen retaliated. First, Eleanor received a notice from the HOA claiming her garden violated landscaping guidelines due to overgrown shrubs, a blatant lie. Next came a letter threatening foreclosure over unpaid HOA dues, even though Eleanor was fully up to date on her payments. The letters were carefully worded, designed to intimidate and create fear. Eleanor could feel the pressure mounting. Every day brought new challenges, angry notes left on her door, icy stares from Karen's loyalists, and sleepless nights spent worrying about what might happen next. But even as the weight of the conflict bore down on her, she refused to back down. She couldn't afford to. This wasn't just about her, but about protecting her community from Karen's grip. The breakthrough came during a late-night strategy session with Mr. Olson. He leaned back in his chair, scanning the documents spread before him. "This isn't just unethical," he said, tapping a line in the financial records. "It's illegal. Karen's actions violate state laws on HOA governance. We need to escalate this." With Mr. Olson's guidance, Eleanor filed an official complaint with the county authorities. The filing outlined Karen's misuse of funds, fraudulent claims, and intimidation tactics. The process was nerve-wracking, but Eleanor felt a spark of hope knowing she wasn't alone. Her neighbors rallied behind her, offering support and even sharing their own experiences of Karen's overreach. As the days passed, Eleanor noticed a shift in the neighborhood. Where there had been silence and fear, there was now murmured defiance. Neighbors began speaking out, and Karen's once tight control started to waver. For the first time, Eleanor felt the tide turning in her favor. It wasn't the end yet, but it was a step closer to justice. The community center buzzed with tension as Eleanor entered the room, clutching a folder filled with evidence. She had arranged this special HOA meeting to finally reveal the truth about Karen Shelton's misuse of power. The low hum of murmured conversations filled the air, punctuated by the occasional shuffle of chairs. Media representatives and a county official sat near the back, their presence a silent reminder that this wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. It was a battle for justice. Karen arrived moments later, her head held high and a practiced smile plastered across her face. She was flanked by several loyal board members, their presence intended to bolster her authority. To anyone observing, she appeared calm and confident, but Eleanor noticed the subtle stiffness in her posture. Karen knew the stakes were high. The meeting began with Karen addressing the room, her voice smooth and authoritative. She spoke about community values, safety, and her commitment to upholding neighborhood standards. Eleanor listened, her frustration mounting with each empty platitude. It was time to end the charade. When Eleanor's turn came, she stood, her hands trembling slightly as she placed her folder on the podium. The room quieted as she cleared her throat. For weeks, I've been looking into actions taken by this HOA, specifically by our president, Karen Shelton, she began. What I've found is deeply troubling. She turned on the projector and played the first video, Karen brazenly walking up to Eleanor's porch and taking a package. Gasps rippled through the audience. Then came the financial documents, displayed on the screen for all to see. This isn't just about packages, Eleanor continued. Karen has been funneling HOA funds into personal projects, including remodeling her own backyard. The room erupted into murmurs, a mixture of shock and anger. Karen's composure cracked for the first time. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed, her voice sharp and defensive. "I was only protecting the neighborhood. These accusations are baseless." Eleanor didn't flinch. "The evidence speaks for itself, Karen. This isn't protection, it's exploitation." The county official stood, raising a hand to quiet the room. "Based on the evidence presented, we will be conducting a full audit of the HOA's finances. Furthermore, Karen Shelton's actions appear to violate state regulations governing homeowner associations. A formal investigation will be launched immediately." Karen's face turned pale, and the murmurs of the residents grew louder. Emboldened by the overwhelming evidence, neighbors began speaking out. "She fined me for no reason," one woman shouted, "and she blocked our patio renovation," another added. The tide had turned. For the first time, Karen was on the defensive, her usual confidence replaced by a strained and faltering demeanor. I only wanted what was best for the community," she stammered, but the words rang hollow. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that Karen's reign was over. The residents, once too afraid to speak, unanimously demanded her resignation. As Karen and her allies left the room, her head bowed in defeat, Eleanor felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't just about exposing Karen. It was about restoring trust and fairness to their neighborhood. For Eleanor, the fight wasn't over yet. There were still steps to take, audits to be conducted, and policies to rewrite. But as she left the meeting, neighbors stopped her to thank her for her courage. In that moment, Eleanor knew she had made a difference, not just for herself, but for the entire community. With Karen removed, the HOA underwent a transformation. The new leadership wasted no time reinstating fair rules, refunding unjust fines, and rebuilding trust. The neighborhood, once divided, began to heal. Karen, facing legal consequences, including fines and community service, faded into the background. Her reputation was shattered, and she became a cautionary tale about the misuse of power. For Eleanor, this was more than a personal victory. Neighbors who had once stayed silent now praised her courage, inspired to stand up for their rights. Max's belated birthday became a joyful celebration, not just of him, but of the strength his mother showed in fighting for justice. The house was filled with laughter, balloons swayed in the breeze, and the smell of cupcakes lingered in the air. Eleanor stood back, watching her son laugh with friends, the weight of the past weeks finally lifting. The fight had been hard, but it proved one thing: truth and perseverance could triumph over manipulation. Karen's downfall was a reminder to everyone that no one was above accountability. As Eleanor hugged Max and joined the festivities, she felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing her efforts had made the community stronger for everyone. This wasn't just a win for her, it was a new beginning for them all,